is there any like sort of esoteric devices that's really cool and cutting edge and that you're interested in?
Yeah, so I think we can start with what's in the market now, and then
Mhm.
what's more and more on the bleeding edge. But uh, I think like genomic sequencing is up there, and there's different types of genomic sequencing, right? There's the stuff that 23andMe does,
Mhm.
which is basically it, it it just tells you at a point like your entire genome. But you can also get it only looks at like certain parts of it. You get whole genome sequencing, which is like sequence absolutely everything in your
Mhm.
DNA. You can start measuring RNA, and I guess for viewers, just in general, going back to some high school biology, right? There's three main analyte types that biochemists tend to look at: it's DNA, RNA, and protein. DNA is just the genetics; it's the building blocks, it's the blueprint. RNA is sort of like a messenger, and then proteins are the actual machines that run in your cells. Like they're tiny little machines that make your cells alive, right? They pretty much do all the activity inside your cells. And so we can measure the first two, DNA and RNA, with decent fidelity. Much like DNA is more stable, so that's easier to uh, sequence. RNA a bit less so, but we've started to create some methods. But where we don't have that much information is around proteins. So in just a single cell, there are thousands, maybe tens of thousands of proteins, but definitely at least a few thousand proteins that are active and expressed. And in even the most leading institutions, like your Harvards or your MITs of the world, uh, at a single sort of experiment, I don't think people can measure more than 70, 80 proteins. And there's thousands up there. So it begs the question, like, what do we really know about the human body? Not much. We know what proteins should be there, but we don't actually have those measurements because we can't measure that at scale. And so some of the interesting companies that are they're not looking at proteins, but there are a whole host of startups that are trying to like sort of map the proteome, right? So like how in the early 2000s people were trying to map the genome, trying to figure out like what genes would like map the human genome, trying to figure out what genes cause what, et cetera. Now people are trying to do that at the protein level, and I think there's a lot of companies trying to do that now. I don't think any of them have like been successful or but it's a growing sort of place of interest. The other place that has sort of blown up recently is this idea of like single cell analysis. So previously, the way like even the way genome sequencing is done, like you take a bunch of cells, blend them together, and then you get a lot of DNA, and you sort of computationally recreate it on the back end. But nowadays, people are able to like isolate a single cell and then map out within that cell what's being expressed, or so like what genes are being turned on, turned off at like a very high fidelity. But again, this is like early days still. It's really expensive to run those experiments. It's not being done very sort of in a widespread fashion. But companies like 10x Genomics, for example, it's a publicly traded companies. They do exactly that sort of single cell analysis. That's where a lot of the activity right now is taking place, like the cutting edge stuff.
Okay. Well, yeah, I like that you touched on the kind of DNA stuff. And now I'm wondering, because you talked about like in the future we can sort of like that we can put in place sort of preventative not measures, but I guess like warnings, right? Like you're saying, like they'll analyze the data and you'll put them through these algorithms, and then maybe when the join health exchange, they're under the threshold or whatever, but then blood pressure goes higher than it should do, and they get whatever red alert, like, um, and so I'm wondering if you've ever thought about diets and how you can use this DNA sequencing to impact people in that way, because there are certain people have certain tolerances, certain intolerances. Certain people have allergies. Also, people, there's all sorts of like nuances to how people's bodies kind of interact with food, how they digest food, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I guess I'm just wondering, because you touched on the DNA thing. Have you ever thought about, like, even if it's just in the future, you know, if it's like in the 10-year, 5-year plan, have you thought much about how you could maybe like help people with diets or anything like that?
Yeah, so like this is one of those things where like everyone has their own unique biology and then everyone has their own special biology, but it's not that unique, right? Like in the sense that if you exist, there's probably like a few hundred people that are like very, very similar to you, close enough that it's like effectively it's the same biology or like very, very similar biology, right? And so what we could do if we have, again, this all comes back to the data that, or the information that we have that allows us to make these sort of arguments. But if we had enough data that, you know, these 100 people, because of their genetics, because of the information we have on them, you know, they do worse eating rice, right? They're better off eating breads, for example. It's just random, right? But for these people, you know, they are best off just being carnivores, or these people are best off being vegans, right? Like that could be possible that like over time, different sets or groups of people have different mutations, and that because of that, certain foods or certain medications definitely, but definitely certain foods as well, could have different effects on their body, right? And so this comes back to the idea of like, and everything we're talking about here it's called precision medicine, and that idea is exactly what it sounds like. Like rather than having this like, you know, everybody eat against the food pyramid or whatever, right? It's more like, hey, like this person needs this because of their unique biology. Let's get them more, I don't know, bread, bananas, whatever they need.
Unchecked governments have eradicated privacy and truth. Those who resist are brought down swiftly, but we refuse to submit. Unipunks are freedom fighters, protected by encrypted shadows. The future we're building is sovereign and uncensorable. The moonlit night